Welcome to another edition of Crime Time with DutyRon. I'm a retired New York City police detective with 20 plus years of law enforcement. And ladies and gentlemen, if you like all things true crime related from a police perspective, please consider hitting the subscribe button, which should be somewhere along the lines of down here, and hit the notification bell so you will get all things DutyRon when I go live or upload another video. Tonight, we're going to talk about the Gabby Petito cause and manner of death, released today by the Teton County Coroner's Office. Dr. Brent Blue had a press conference, and he had, in DutyRon fashion, some technical difficulties, and they worked it out. We're going to talk about it today. I have special guest Ed Wallace, retired first grade detective from the crime scene unit in the NYPD. He served 20 plus years in the NYPD. And he's going to join us. Barbara Butcher is on a plane right now, flying home from an undisclosed location. So she'll be on the next show. Thank you to the Patreon supporters, the channel members, everyone who gives Super Chat and becomes a channel member. I really, really appreciate each and every one of you. But before we get started, I want to play just the press conference so we can hear the coroner talk about the manner and the cause of death of Gabby Petito. So without further ado, I'm going to play that, and then we're going to get into it. We're going to break it down. And of course, prayers across the board for Gabby Petito, the Schmidt family, the Petito family, on a very difficult day. And as we all know, they had already been notified of the manner and cause of death before this press conference. I know that from being in the business for a long time. They are afforded that before the public knows it, and they are needing all of our support, all of our prayers and strength. So here is the coroner talking about the cause and manner.
Teton County, Wyoming Coroner. After a detailed investigation by our forensic pathologist, our anthropologist, and local law enforcement, with assistance from the FBI, the Teton County Coroner Office is filing the following verdict in the death of Gabrielle Lenora Petito. We hereby find the cause and manner of death to be the cause, death by strangulation, and manner is homicide. By Wyoming state statute, no other information will be released about the autopsy. The only thing that is released in the state of Wyoming is cause and manner of death.
I think they said they can't hear you. Just 1 second.
Here's the do-over.
Should I start over then?
Sure.
Thank you for joining us. Sorry about the audio issue. I'm Dr. Brent Blue, Teton County, Wyoming Coroner. After a detailed investigation by our forensic pathologist, our anthropologist, and local law enforcement, with assistance from the FBI, the Teton County Coroner's Office is filing the following verdict. In the manner of death of Gabrielle Lenora Petito, we find the cause and manner to be cause, death by strangulation, and manner is homicide. By Wyoming state statute, only the cause and manner of death are released. Their autopsy findings and photographs and that sort of material is not released by state statute. And I'll be glad to entertain some questions at this time.
All right, folks, I'm going to pause that and bring us back to full screen. So he said under the Wyoming statute, and he mentions this several times during the course of this press conference, that under Wyoming statute, he can only release the cause and manner of death. So Dr. Blue, Brent Blue, was sticking to basics. He was sticking to what he could give us and what he couldn't give us. And really, he didn't give us much, but at the end of it, we did get a couple of really good questions asked by some of the reporters. My next guest and co-host is no slouch in the crime scene unit and investigation field. This is retired first grade detective Ed Wallace from the crime scene unit of the NYPD. He is here to join us. Ed, thank you for taking out time out of your busy schedule. Thank you, Ed.
My pleasure, Ron.
And before we get into this, I want to say a special shout out to the men and women of Brooklyn South Warrant Squad. They are watching our program, and I want to just wish the men and women of the Brooklyn South Warrant Squad a safe tour. As always, we back our brothers and sisters in blue. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Ron.
Ed, so you got a chance to look at this presser. I know you and I were busy today at our regular day jobs, but we did take a moment to go over some of the fine points of this press release. You got anything for the audience? What was your takeaway from what we saw today before we break it down piece by piece?
Well, he was very guarded in his presentation. He kept, as you said, referring back to the state law and what he can and cannot say. He didn't give out that much information. And there were several times when he would refer back to questions about the condition of Gabby, and by saying, well, the body has been out there at least 3 to 4 weeks. The body's been out there at least 3 to 4 weeks. Or he would deflect other questions by saying, under state law, we're not allowed to give out that kind of information.
You know, and I think that's a great point, but to keep an investigation close to the vest and keep it true, you can't give and expose all your cards. And us as human beings and civilians, we want to know. We want to know all the details. But I did take away some fine points of some of the reporters who asked questions like, was Gabby Petito pregnant? He definitively answered and said no. You, myself, and Barbara, we all had a conversation about this in our previous live stream. I asked her, as a matter of fact, I asked Barbara straight out, do they do a rape kit and to see if the decedent was pregnant? And she said right away, it's the rape kit is not necessary, but I would certainly do it. And he talked about dotting his I's and crossing his T's. Can you speak a little bit about the importance of covering all grounds and how long that takes?
Oh, yeah. With any case, it's not just this case. I mean, all cases should have their I's dotted and their T's crossed. You know, you can never get in trouble for doing more. You can only get in trouble for doing less. Okay. So, so he went through the standard protocols and procedures, but in this case, you know, he's a small office. He brought in experts. He brought in an anthropologist. He had the pathologist, and between the two, and then they also did toxicology.
Can you talk about what an anthropologist and the such does for the people that are listening? Just break that down for some of our listening audience, Ed.
So in this case, the anthropologist specialty is the skeletal structure, the bones, if you will, and so, and also, you know, the tissue, the muscles, and things of that nature. So they would be looking at all of those features on the decedent, you know, checking the bones for various damage, whether the damage was man-made or made by animals, things of that nature, or if there were tool marks on the bones. In this case, he deemed strangulation. So then the anthropologist would be the specialist that may, you know, while the pathologist could obviously determine a broken hyoid bone, but the anthropologist would be the actual specialist involved in that, and some of the other damage that to the muscle skeletal structure and so forth of the body.
Hey, Ed, I wanted to put that up there because I've gotten probably about 15 emails about proper definition of throttling. I've heard a couple of different explanations. Can you talk about that and what that is in an investigation, or have you heard of that, or is that some type of slang term that you maybe never heard of?
I'm not entirely sure what they mean by throttling.
Okay, so then we'll we'll save that for Barbara Butcher for tomorrow night. Again, for the folks who are joining, this is Ed Wallace. He's a retired crime scene investigator. He's an expert at blood splatter, crime scene recreation, and everything that goes from soup to nuts in a crime scene. We heard some of the reporters talk about DNA samples, and that is an expertise of Ed Wallace. DNA samples were taken, and the coroner confirmed definitively that they were taken by law enforcement. When he was asked, did DNA samples get recovered or retrieved in this crime scene, he hands down said yes. Any thoughts on that, Ed?
Yeah, well, like I said, I mentioned this in a previous episode about strangulation and DNA, and we also mentioned how that they were fiancés and that there could be commingling of their DNA, fingerprints, and things of that nature, hairs and fibers. But I said it's about context. And I said in the previous episode, for instance, if Gabby was strangled to death, manual strangulation. Now, again, here, the pathologist, or the coroner rather, did not say whether this was manual strangulation or mechanical strangulation.
Right.
But I mentioned back then about manual strangulation, and if they found bruising around the neck to suggestive of manual strangulation by hands, that then they could search those areas for fingerprints and for DNA. And in this case, if he did manually strangle her with his hands, then there would be a mixture of his DNA and her DNA around those areas of the bruising of the neck where the strangulation occurred. Now, I have heard of the term throttling in regards to strangulation, if that's what you were referring to earlier.
Yes, that's what I was referring to.
Oh, okay.
Again, some folks, the actual art of strangulation, we heard people talk about, some couples in intimate moments use that type of, they'll take someone, strangle them right to the point of passing out and then let go.
Right.
I think that a lot of references were made if this was some type of practice.
Autoerotic type of situation.
Yes.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that was mixed in with that. I saw, I watched a lot of parts of a lot of videos, but sometimes, when you're talking about a case like this and you're talking about an extensive investigation, which will go, like the coroner said, like Barbara Butcher said, which will go from A to Z, and they might even dot their I's, cross their T's, and double back and check over and over. They also spoke about going back to the crime scene. We talked with Barbara, and she said, they went back here to the crime scene to see if there was any remains scattered anywhere else. 20 plus days, 3 to 4 weeks timeline. That's an extreme possibility.
Well, I would be shocked if there wasn't, given the time frame. And he kept referring, well, the body was out there 3 to 4 weeks. Well, the body was out there 3 to 4 weeks, which suggests to me that, he's not giving us the details, but I believe there was some kind of damage to the body from the indigenous wildlife, and there was decomposition and things of that. There may have been some scattering. In addition, he also let out during that press conference that the FBI had taken forensic entomology evidence, which are insects, and submitted them for analysis to a forensic entomologist, an insect specialist, in connection with this case.
Absolutely. And I want to play a quick clip from you, myself, and Barbara last week. We did a video, and I'm going to play just a couple of little highlights from it because I think it's important. So let me add this to the stream for everybody to see. This might get confusing. Let me go full screen with it and give it a little volume. What are some of the things that all the folks who are involved? Barbara, everybody wants to know, Gabby Petito, 22 years old. She was out potentially for over 20 days in Wyoming in the Teton National Park. Just could you give some of the viewing audience what kind of challenges you have as a medical examiner / all the folks who are involved in that recovery? What are some of the things that they're up against there? And I'll show some pictures as you speak.
Okay. She was Gabby was found in the Moran Vista camp area, which is what they call a dispersed campground. In other words, it's has no facilities. It's not a place where you just pitch a tent and get water, showers, or electricity. This is very, very remote area, very wild area. Now, after 21 days, we all understand the nature of decomposition. And in addition, being a wild area.
We're going to talk in a few minutes about how often and what percentages the hyoid bone gets broken in the neck in a strangulation. You guys might be surprised to hear that it doesn't happen as often as you think.
Area, there are bobcats, cougars, all kinds of vermin, and you have to be realistic about what kind of remains you'll be looking for. And the big challenge is to not just find those remains, but to find all the remains. You mentioned that the medical examiner's office had gone back a second time to the site, and that's most likely because they may have found that they were missing a bone or some such, and went back to see if they could find everything. That's just the realistic likely scenario here. I don't know exactly what her remains looked like, but after 21 days in the wilderness.
Yeah. Yeah. So Barbara basically broke it down after 21 days or more out in the wilderness. And the coroner spoke about it. He brought that up several times. So let me bring it back to us here, Ed. You've been around the medical examiner's office. You worked for quite a few years with Barbara Butcher in the New York City medical examiner's office. Now, we know this from hearing coroners and medical examiners and looking and reading reports. That hyoid bone, which is here in the neck, we heard this on the infamous Jeffrey Epstein case. His was broken from an alleged strangulation, right? Or hanging, actually.
Hanging, yes.
Right, hanging, not strangulation, hanging, right? It takes a lot to break that bone, a lot of pressure. Mm-hmm. So if, in fact, that bone was broken, at what point in time do you think that would be released? And now people are saying that the coroner's report is available online, but I would imagine that a lot of it is redacted and a lot of it you can't see for obvious reasons.
Well, I would think, given the amount of times that he said under state law, I can't release that information, that those areas that he kept saying that would be redacted in the online report, especially since this is a homicide case that is murder, and they haven't identified or arrested or spoke to the suspect of it, the person of interest, as they like to say. And so I doubt that's in there. I doubt that would be in there for public view on an online post-mortem exam.
No. I think I want to play, and what's your thoughts on this? Some of the reporters' questions, and we could break it down a little bit, and I'll fast forward over the sillier questions. What do you think, Ed?
Go ahead.
Okay, good. Let's do this. I'm gonna add it back into the stream, and I'm gonna fast forward over some of the nonsense.
Thank you for joining us. Sorry about the audio issue. I'm Dr. Autopsy is released. Just the cause of.
Do you have any doubts?
Here we go.
3 to 4 weeks.
A little bit of technical issues.
You will probably be the most important.
All right, we're not going to listen to that.
The process to how you arrive.
Hold on. I know there was one question
Determination
before.
of cause and manner of death. Who committed the homicide?
Okay, here we go.
Manner of death.
Sorry, folks.
Zoom call, but really, again,
Forensic pathologist or
date of death and when.
All right, here is the first question. They're working
Hi,
it out.
Brian. This is Alex with the News and Guide. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm curious whether you're able to pinpoint a date of death and when, and if you know whether or when Gabby's remains will be returned to her family.
The remains have been returned to the mortuary here, and the mortuary is dealing with the family at this time.
So he said the remains were already handed over to the mortuary. That's the funeral home. And then
No. The mortuary, his mortuary, he still has the body. They haven't made the arrangements to get the body back yet.
okay, I'm gonna listen to the next thing that he says here, and that's what made it confusing. Is he said is waiting to make arrangements with the family. So
Right.
let's listen in.
As far as the disposition of the remains, as far as forensic pathologist or anthropologist and local law enforcement, with assistance from the FBI, the Teton County Coroner's Office is following the following verdict. In the manner of death of, what's the question? I didn't hear a question.
Oy vey.
That is actually law enforcement folks.
And Guide, can you hear me?
Okay, here it
Yes.
is.
I'm curious whether you're able to pinpoint a date of death and when, and if you know whether or when Gabby's remains will be returned to her family.
The remains have been returned to the mortuary here, and the mortuary is dealing with the family at this time as far as the disposition of the remains.
All right. So what exactly does that mean, Ed? So, it's in their mortuary and not the funeral home. But why would he say after that and is dealing with the family? That's what the confusing part was.
Right. So his mortuary is dealing with the family to make arrangements to transport that body back home to them. So whether that body is going to Long Island or to Florida, I'm not sure. But that body is still in his possession. So that's just a term they use there, mortuary, where they're storing the bodies.
Okay. All right. I got you. All right. That makes sense. Thanks for clearing that up.
As far as the time of death, we are estimating 3 to 4 weeks from the time that the body was found. That is actually
So 3 to 4 weeks from September 19th. So 3 to 4 weeks back puts us right at that 27th to August 27th to August 30th date, correct?
About that, yes.
Yeah. So he was being, 3 to 4 weeks is, it's a wide variation, and he's, I guess, trying to cover in case it was a little earlier. But they have phone records and conversations. I believe a last actual FaceTime was August 25th with Gabby and her mom. So let's let the rest of this go.
law enforcement folks than our office.
Chris, Vivian, you are able to ask your question.
What's the question? I didn't hear a question.
Chris, I believe that you are muted.
By the way, this is a terrible way to do a press conference.
I know.
Okay, it's John Walsh from In Pursuit.
No, we're going to go over that. We're going to pass that up because that was ridiculous.
Hi there, this is Heather Lee, a reporter at ABC Action News in Tampa, Florida. I just wanted to know if you could explain why it took about a month for this process to finish. I think a lot of people were hoping that they would learn this information sooner. So I just think if you could just explain the process and why it took a month.
This was a good question.
Well, the main reason was that we were very exacting in our examination and the detail by which that examination was done. We were waiting for various specialists to come in and help us with this investigation. We were waiting on toxicology to be returned, and it was just a matter of making sure we had everything right.
Now, Barbara talked about this, Ed, in our previous stream about tox going out to an outside department or agency or jobbing it out to a company, it takes time. And he mentions that here. So we actually spoke about this over a week and a half ago.
Yes, and in addition, he probably doesn't have an in-house anthropologist, and nor does he probably have an in-house pathologist. So he probably had to contract both of those specialists and then bring them in. So he had to identify them, check their schedules, and then issue them a contract and bring them in to do the work.
Right. All right, here we go. Everybody's stuck on the throttling. Oh boy.
Thank you.
Yeah. You know,
Is there another question?
Brian Enton. I believe you're unmuted right now.
This is ridiculous.
Ever. And
oh boy.
Scene or the scene of the death, the scene of the body, the condition
The process to
to be determined by law enforcement.
right, but I thank you for your hard work. And I always say in
ridiculous.
so many cases I've been involved in, let the pathologist and the
Those are the four choices.
All right, this will be the last one, and then we'll come back live.
Hey there, doctor. This is Rochelle Aline with ABC Action News in Tampa. Just a quick question. Can you kind of walk us through the process to how you arrived at this specific manner of death?
In the state of Wyoming, there are four possibilities for a manner of death. They are homicide, suicide, accident, and natural. And those are the four choices. When we do an investigation, we look at the crime scene or the scene of the death, the scene of the body, the condition of the body, and findings at autopsy and toxicology. And that is how we arrive at the manner of death. So it really depends on lots of different circumstances.
Dr. Stephen Fabian again from Inside Edition. Can you tell us if the body was buried when it was discovered, or if the body was on the surface?
I can't tell you that. That's would be something you'd have to ask the FBI, because we're not allowed to release that information.
All right. So yeah, there was a lot of questions that he couldn't answer. And again, I was going to scroll forward, but this was just such mayhem with the questions. He was asked another good one, Ed, and you and I spoke about it, whether Gabby was pregnant. And a lot of people had their thoughts and opinions on that. He hands down said no. That was his answer.
Yep.
And that comes from, again, I asked Barbara about the rape kit, and then she elaborated and also went on to say about checking to see if, the victim is pregnant as well. It's covered in a full, complete autopsy. So it was good. I have the chat on slow so we can take questions in about 5 minutes. Any other points that you want to bring up about this?
No, again, they bring up the throttling issue. Now, if this couple was into that type of sexual behavior, there would be indicators and bruises to the neck that would have been seen before this incident. That's, and people that do this, they go to great pains to try to protect their necks from showing this type of damage that can occur with that kind of behavior and activity. And there was no indication of this that I'm aware of.
Right. And also a possibility down the road, and this is, after there's an arrest and a trial that would go on, we'll hear conversations like perhaps any type of indication that she fought back, fingernails scratching their attackers, with DNA perhaps underneath, or any type of indication. But again, with the condition and being out in the wilderness 20 plus days, the amount of decomposition is extreme. We talked about the specialists, and you talked about a lot of different aspects of what goes on with examining the different bugs and different things that are there. You want to tell the audience how that is beneficial in determining a timeline?
Okay, and this again goes all back to my studies at the body farm and with entomology and things of that nature. So we know from studies conducted at the body farm that certain insects arrive at certain time periods when to a decaying body, and they will leave their presence there in the form of eggs, maggots, and generations of flies. And if you collect the pupae, the maggots, some dead flies, some live flies, the entomologist can tell how many generations of flies are on this body, and then from them they know the time period that it takes to obtain those generations, and then they can estimate the time of death based upon the presence of the various insects and the generation of insects that are present.
And that's fascinating. Most of us common folk don't know that. I mean, you and I, we talked about this extensively. So some of the listening audience had, no clue that is even a possibility. It is horrible sounding, but it is part of science. And that's what goes on in the body farm. Like you said, they study bodies placed up in a tree, partially buried, laid out, left out, for wildlife to. The study that goes on in Tennessee there is invaluable when it comes to recoveries like this from out in the wilderness.
Absolutely, and we can thank people like Dr. Bass, Dr. Murray Marks, Dr. Sims, and so forth from the University of Tennessee, and all the people that donated their bodies to science for this information that we were able to learn from these studies. I had several cases, some involving entomological evidence in New York. I had a vehicle that was parked on a city street in Brooklyn, and the neighbors knew the vehicle was not from their community. And then over time, the vehicle had a bad odor to it, and they called the police. And the vehicle had Canada, Ontario license plates on it. And when the police responded, the fire department responded, they opened the trunk, and there was a dead body inside of the trunk that had been there for some time. And when I got there, there were numerous maggots, pupae, and flies and so forth. So I collected a lot of that insect evidence and submitted it for analysis. And if found out that the flies were in fact not indigenous to New York City or New York State, that they were indigenous to Ontario, Canada. So from that, using that information, the pathologist and other people suspected that the body was in fact killed in Ontario, Canada, and driven back across the border into the United States and left in Brooklyn. And further investigation revealed that this was a Brooklyn drug gang member who were dealing with drug dealers in Ontario, Canada. And this particular person drove up from Brooklyn to deliver proceeds from drug sales in Brooklyn. And he was a little short on the money and was killed in Canada and sent back to Brooklyn and left on the streets there as a sign, hey, don't come back here without our money.
Wow. Oh, unbelievable. There's so many different cases that we could do a complete show on all the cases that you've covered. Somebody put in the chat, and I haven't seen it yet, but I probably, I'm going to go with this. Official coroner's report, manual strangulation, throttling. Could be. We're going to go and check that out. I want to just show quickly just another 2 minutes of a piece from Barbara Butcher. She talks about the overview of testing remains, the coroner versus the pathologist, and the rape kit. This is just 3 minutes of info, so I'm going to play this quickly for you guys, and then we're going to wrap it up and we'll take some questions. This is from an earlier live stream, guys. That are in the chat, they have no clue, and most people who don't know anything about this business have no clue of what exactly they're looking for. Would you be able to just give a an overview of some of the tests that would be done, or some of the
Yeah.
things, and why it would take so long?
Sure. Again, it's a little surprising that they released a manner of death without a cause of death. So the immediate implication is, well, we don't know the cause of death yet until we finalize all our tests, our toxicology tests, our tissue tests, closer examination perhaps of the hyoid bone, of a fracture. So you don't generally release a manner of death until you release a cause, right?
So this was about a week and a half ago, this live stream that we did with Barbara, and she's going to join us tomorrow night. You're not going to want to miss it, because tomorrow night I have a set of questions that are user generated and also from myself and Ed. We're going to rapid fire some questions at her. And if you have any questions, go over to DutyRon.com and put in the message bar, message for Barbara. So message for Barbara, and then let it roll, and then I'll pick them out and I'll ask those to her tomorrow night.
Well, here I'm forced to wonder if they do know the cause of death, but because of the situation with this person of interest suspect, Laundrie, they don't want to yet release that information, because it's very unusual. Ed, have you seen that yet, where they've released the manner and not a cause?
No, and I thought the same thing, Barbara, the same thing as you. I mean, if there's obvious gunshots or blunt force trauma injuries, you would think that would be a no-brainer to be able to give out that information. So I'm a little leery about why they would just say homicide without giving the rest of the details.
Yeah. Well, I know I did a little research and I reached out to some of my colleagues in Wyoming and the surrounding areas. The coroner there, Dr. Brent Blue, is he's not a pathologist. He's an elected coroner, a family practice doctor who's new to the job.
So let me stop it right there. That caused a firestorm of questions. He's relatively new. He's elected to his position, and he's a family doctor. You know for sure that he had to have reached out to other folks to help him with this. He was definitely in over his head.
So, there may be some, there's a learning curve on the terminology and what's done and what isn't done. But I understand that initially it was reported that he did the autopsy. In Wyoming, you don't have to have a forensic pathologist do it. It could be a coroner.
So a family doctor perhaps did the autopsy on his own without anybody there to assist or watch?
We don't really know right yet. He said to the press, "I did a preliminary autopsy."
Wow.
So, but then I just heard this evening, maybe half an hour ago, from a colleague that a Dr. Thomas Brennan, who is a pathologist, may have been called in from Sheridan, Wyoming. In which case, then he would have that expertise there.
And what was the doctor's name there? The coroner from Washington? That possibly be?
Oh, sure. I would have our best forensic pathologist on the job, with the coroner observing, and of course, and the law enforcement personnel. So I think Mimi asked about who's present at the autopsy, who has to be there, and that would be the lead detective, any investigating officers, FBI, and of course the medical examiner. In this case, a coroner, and hopefully that forensic pathologist from Sheridan, Wyoming, would be there.
Brenner.
Yeah.
So, again, if the lead detective is there, he's there for the reason of just actually visually seeing it, but also to ask you, hey, we had this happen or something developed since we brought the decedent in. We would like you to check for this. So, right? Isn't that kind of like the dialogue that could go back and forth between?
Absolutely.
Is there a checklist that goes in an autopsy? Is there, checking for DNA under fingernails. Is that some of the things that the medical examiner does, or is that what the crime scene unit guys do? I would, I know the answer to this question, but I'm asking you for the benefit of the audience.
Yeah, the medical examiner would collect any evidence from the body itself, and then and work closely with crime scene unit. That's the best way to do it, obviously. Like you mentioned, rape kit. Yes, it's always a good idea. There's no. We have no direct knowledge of anything that happened to this poor girl before her death.
So you want to eliminate anything, and I wanted to answer yes to that, but since I didn't actually know 100%, I would just wait to talk with you and get that answer. So
yeah.
All right, so that was parts of our live stream with Barbara. That video was seen across the globe by almost 2 million people, and I thank everybody for joining in regards to that. Ed, you have anything else you want to add before we wrap up? Because I'm going to take 5 minutes of questions. I'm already 10 minutes over the time I promised you.
No worries. I keep seeing in the chat that the talking of throttling. So the definition of throttling is the manual deprivation of air by hands and fingers. Okay, so I hope that puts that to bed now about what exactly we're talking about when they say throttling. And throttling is also, people use that term for beating. They throttled the person, things of that nature.
Right.
But in this case, if it is in fact in the postmortem report and it says manual strangulation by throttling, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. People are questioning and looking at everything on this, and you know what? We're all so involved in it that everybody wants to know every little detail. But again, the coroner stated probably about 8 to 10 times under Wyoming statute, we can only talk about the manner and cause of death. So almost all of the questions didn't get answered, but some of the good ones, like a reporter asked, hey, did she have any visible injuries that were on her body that were healing? And we know that came from a previous 2 days ago. It was question brought up that she was sandboarding, and there was a picture of her from the back. It was actually a still from a video, and it looked like on the right side of her upper back there was bruising. So I know that reporter asked that question because it was that was a flurry of questions, and people were wanting to know, hey, did she have prior domestic violence assaults against her? Was she being battered over a period of time that they've been on the road, perhaps since July? So that reporter had, that was a good question, I believe. I want to say thank you for the $50 super chat by B. Holly. She's a channel member. There's actually a super sticker. Thank you for that. Tomorrow night, we're going to dive deep into the autopsy results and what potentially what this case could bring us down the road. Again, information will not be released recklessly to keep the integrity of this investigation. Ed knows that. I know it. Most people who are in law enforcement know it. If Brian Laundrie is arrested and brought to justice and charged with this crime, don't look for autopsy information as far as the hyoid bone being broken or things of that nature. That won't come out until we go to a trial.
Hey, Ron?
Yeah.
There's another thing that happens when people are manually strangled that we didn't really talk about, and it's called petechial hemorrhaging. Now, petechial hemorrhaging, what it is the capillaries of the blood vessels in your eyes, your lips, on the inside of your lips, in the inside of your eyelids, and the whites of your eyes, due to the lack of air, will burst and cause bleeding. So those are all other indications of strangulation and asphyxiation that could be looked for as well, and would be able to be found. I saw some expert on a news station earlier today who said some things, alleged expert, let me just put it that way, who said some things about the manual strangulation that just were not accurate. And it takes a lot of energy and strength and time. It's not a fast death to kill somebody like this. And, many people think that they have killed somebody and choked them out until they passed out. And then only to find these people are not in fact dead, just passed out. And then they wake up later and their eyes are all full of blood and can't see because of the hemorrhaging that occurred in those areas. So, despite what you may or not hear on from certain forensic experts on certain news channels, it is not a fast and painless death.
Yes, thank you for sharing that, Ed. And let's talk quickly before we wrap up about the medical examiner slipped up at one point and said,
Oh yeah.
He talked about death at the hands of domestic violence. And he also brought up another thing that everybody is struggling with is, why did Gabby Petito and her case get so much media attention? We heard her father, Joe, at the lawyer's office say it's up to the media to get these cases out there. We don't control it. The families don't control it. The media does. So he threw that back out on the media. But this medical examiner went one step and doubled down on it. And he talked about all of the folks who don't get the coverage. But he did make an indication, a big indication, that this was a domestic. You want to talk just a tad bit about that?
Oh yeah. Well, he tried to avoid those types of questions early on in the press conference, but he slipped up big time when he made that comment, because it is pretty apparent to me that his opinion was that this was a domestic violence murder.
Yeah, there's no sidestepping that. And when he was saying that, and I was listening to it, there's a video. If you, I'll link it down below in the description. I did a video live of the audio of this medical examiner, Dr. Brent Blue, and he was out of his element. He even said that he called the media a circus, and he said that the circus is continuing. But yes, I appreciate that, Ed. If you don't mind, let's look into the chat for a couple of seconds. Radar CP sends in a $10 super chat and says, I'm hoping the cameras that picked up Brian Laundrie using the credit card will pick up bruising and cuts on his arms and hands from her struggle. And no doubt, if that is there, it is part of the evidence package. We all know that. Let's look. And if you see something that I don't see, Ed, just let me know and I'll highlight it. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you to all of the new channel members, the new people who subscribed. Thank you to my Patreon supporters and the moderators. And I always forget this, but the replay viewers, thank you so much for replay viewers. I really appreciate you guys. You guys are the backbone of all of the YouTube channels that are out there. The people who replay and watch, at a different time, you guys are freaking awesome. So thank you for that. And Ed is in the comment section answering comments. So let me see here. Miss Darcham says there was more that happened. He did it. Why run? And his family knows. Maybe they suffer the same. Maybe they suffer the same that poor girl. Rest in peace, Gabby. Yes.
Hey, Ron, another thing that pops into my head is the preppy killer and the defense he tried to use. And if they ever catch Brian here, I hope he doesn't try to go down that road.
Yeah.
Where he says it was rough sex that got out of hand.
Right. And, again, that is a defense attorney's dream. And, that's not off the table here. Bailey, thank you for the super chat. She says, could his domestic violence comment be in relation to the Moab issue? I guess not relevant to his exam. So why say that? We don't know. He was definitely out of his element. He was under pressure. We're not 100% sure. So it's not 100% sure why he said that. So wasn't it odd DutyRon and Ed, the coroner, answered the pregnancy question? Wasn't it odd, DutyRon and Ed, that the coroner answered the pregnancy question? I don't know. Did you find that odd, Ed?
Well, given the fact that he kept deflecting all those other questions, why did he answer this one?
And he answered that like, boom.
He kept like the tough questions. He went right to the state says I can't tell you that.
I'm still looking in the comments for any kind of good comments. I mean, all comments are good, but I want to get a juicy one. So I'm really looking for a good one. Ed, why would he not answer about the tox screen?
Why would he not answer about the tox screening? He did answer. He said there was that's right. I have that written right here. Yes, he deflected that.
Yes.
Yes, he deflected that. Yeah.
He referred to the FBI. He said that has to come from the FBI.
Well, I don't know why. Again, he deflected those questions, and so I guess your guess is as good as mine. Why he did that? I mean, it seems like every time he said, like, the body was out there 3 or 4 weeks, and to me that suggested that there was in fact damage to the body caused by decomp and the indigenous wildlife, and it was possibly scattering as well. I see some questions about would the eyeballs still be there and so forth,
right?
And the answer is a definite maybe.
Right.
we can't say because we don't have that information.
Groovy Tuesday, that is a great comment, and I think you're right. I agree with you. Stacy Hines says, to me, it proves intent. It takes like 8 minutes to strangle somebody. I think him moving away from others also shows premeditation. Could be, yeah. So I'm looking for any more questions because I want to wrap this up. I know you got a Zoom meeting coming up soon. Justice for Gabby, yes, I agree. Let's see. So here's a question from Lupus. So we look at murder, yes or no? Yeah, yes, 100%. That was established. But thank you for that question. No, hold on a second. Thank you, Emily, for the super sticker. Super chat. Tell people how this wasn't an accident. It wasn't an accident. I don't know why anybody would think this is an accident, and anybody that's saying it, it's ridiculous.
That was a ridiculous question at the press conference.
Yeah. There was another good question. Hold on a second. British Static 174 says, "Love Ed. I always feel like I can solve crimes after listening to his wisdom." Thank you for that. Thank you. Some people see similarities between this case and that of the Watts case. That's debatable, but yeah, there are similarities. Watts did strangle his wife, and it's alleged that she was looking right at him and just let him do it, according to him. But he's full of shit, so who knows? Here's Kim Queen saying it was all through and through. He chose strangulation because he could try to use rough sex argument. He chose to leave her out there for maximum decomposition. He created alibis, hitchhiking. Very, very good, Kim. All those are valid points, I believe. We talked about this K in Maine. Police incident happened on August 12th. Gabby was seen alive on August 27th, but the timeline of the 3 to 4 weeks fits right in from either the 27th or 30th, 27th through the 30th. It still falls in that 3 week period. All right. I think that's going to be it. Guys, again, remember, these are professional. This is stuff coming from a professional. Ed is a retired crime scene investigator. He specializes in crime scene recreation, blood splatter, and everything in between. DNA evidence, all kinds of stuff. Ed laughs at that because I always toot his horn, and I don't toot it the right way. But Ed,
I just laughed when it's blood spatter, not splatter. And I'm teaching a blood spatter class this week right now for the New Jersey State Police, and one of my students said that, and I said,
it sounds better with splatter. I like it better. It gives more of an impact, and you see it. Anyways, you're right. And I said that yesterday. I said it on my live yesterday. I sometimes don't say things the proper way, and then people correct me afterwards. So it's always good to get corrected. So let me DutyRon, everyone's laughing at me. Okay, so I think we covered a lot. I got to let you go because it's 55 minutes. Ed, thank you. Will you come back tomorrow night with Barbara at 8 o'clock? We'll do this again.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to be back tomorrow night.
It'd be my pleasure.
Excellent. Thank you for taking out the time. And as I always like to end all of these live streams, I like to say, God bless the world. God bless the United States of America. And God bless each and every one of us here in the chat and all victims of crime and their families, but especially Gabby Petito and her family. They need us now more than ever to support them and send them strength, prayers, and positive vibes. And everybody whose loved ones are outstanding and victims of crimes across the globe. Thank you on behalf of Crime Time with DutyRon, Ed Wallace, myself. Good night. We're going to take you out to the outro. Good night, guys from New York. Peace.